Okay, so get this right. We're diving into SpiRit-LM, and it's blowing my mind.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it changes things. Like instead of separating speech and text.
It's treating them like they're kind of the same thing, like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And the way it learns is wild. Imagine like reading a sentence, but some words are audio clips.
Oh, hold on. So it's like learning a song, but you're hearing the music and reading lyrics at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's called interleaving, and it seems to be super effective, like shuffling together written and spoken words.
Makes sense to me. We do that all the time, switching between talking and texting. But does it actually help it understand better?
Well, they tested it with this thing called the story close test. Basically, it listens to a story and has to pick the best ending.
So it's like AI choose your own adventure.
Yeah, kinda. And get this, when it's listening to the stories, it does way better than models that only trained on text.
Wow, okay. It's actually better at understanding speech in some cases. So it can understand, but can it generate language too? Both ways.
That's where it gets really cool. They had to do things like transcribing speech, we call that ASR, and then also TTS, which is generating speech from text.
So going from spoken words to written and back again, like our phones do, but hopefully better.
Right. Even a smaller version with 7 billion parameters got really good results. But they didn't stop there. They wanted to see how expressive they could make the speech.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Did they teach it emotions? Because let's be real, that robotic voice is getting old.
They did. They created SpiRit-LM Expressive. And what's cool is that they added something called pitch and style tokens, which basically means they're teaching it to understand and use the emotions in our voices.
Hold up. So it's not just the words, but how we say them, like happy, sad, sarcastic.
Exactly. And early results are really promising. They even made a whole new benchmark called Speech Text Sentiment Preservation, or STSP, to test it.
This is wild. Imagine the possibilities, virtual assistants that actually sound like people, audiobooks with real emotion. Okay, but how did they even build this thing? It's incredible.
Well, they started with a strong base, the 7 billion parameter version of LMA2. Then they retrained it on a huge data set of text and speech. But here's the kicker. They made sure the text and speech were aligned.
Aligned, like subtitles for a movie. So you have the same info, both written and spoken, together.
You got it. That was super important because it lets them use that interleaving technique.
Ah, okay, now I see. Mixing it all up while it learns, making it figure out how speech and text connect. So cool. So it's really learning how we communicate, not just how computers do, but how does it actually compare to other language models out there? Is it as good as it seems?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question, and that's exactly what we're going to dive into next.
The SpiRit-LM is like the star athlete of language models, huh? Crushing both speech and text tasks. Okay, I'm hooked. How does it actually stack up against the competition?
Right, well, to really get it, we got to look at the usual suspects in speech-related AI. One common approach has been using a bunch of separate models, like an assembly line.
Okay, so instead of one model doing it all, you have a different model for each step.
Yeah. One machine transcribes speech to text, that's ASR, then another one processes the text, and another turns it back into audio, TTS.
So it works, but it's kind of clunky, like those old stereos with a separate box for everything.
Yeah, exactly. They can be good on their own, but they just don't have that flow that SpiRit-LM has, going back and forth between speech and text. Like it's the difference between translating a book and actually getting the language.
Makes sense. It's like when you stop translating in your head and start to think in another language.
But how does SpiRit-LM do on those classic language tests? Not just story close, but others.
Oh, they really put it through the ringer. For speech understanding, they use benchmarks like Swuggy, Splimp, even two kinds of story close the original, and a topic-based one.
So testing its vocabulary, its grammar, making sure it understands the story, not just repeating words. Exactly. And the results were impressive. SpiRit-LM base, that's the one without the fancy emotion stuff,
Yeah.
did as well or better than existing models on most of those tasks.
Hold up. So it's not even designed specifically for speech, and it's already beating the specialists? That's wild.
It is. And remember, this is all while it's also being trained on text-based stuff. Multitasking to the max.
That's like a jack of all trades, but actually mastering a bunch of them. But did all that speech training mess up its text abilities? It's like being a brain surgeon at a rocket scientist.
That was definitely a concern. But get this, even after all those speech tokens, it still did really well on text benchmarks like MMLU.
MMLU sounds intense.
It's a massive multitask language understanding, basically a really tough test. And while SpiRit-LM did slip a tiny bit on some text-only tasks compared to Llama 2, the fact it can do both is amazing.
It's like the AI Olympics, and this model's going for gold and everything, but I'm still stuck on those cross-modal skills, that back and forth. What else can it do there?
Well, they made some really clever tests just for that, like cross-modal story close.
Okay, we had regular story close. Now it's cross-modal. What's the difference?
So, same idea, but here, the story's a mix of text and speech. Like, you might get the beginning written out, but the endings are spoken aloud, or the other way around.
Whoa, so it's not just understanding the story, but how it's being presented.
Exactly. And SpiRit-LM aced it. Just went back and forth, no problem. It was actually better at going from speech to text, which is interesting.
Huh. Maybe our brains work that way too. But this has got to be good for more than just stories. We're talking about changing how we use technology.
Right. They tested it on more practical stuff, too, like
Right.
that speech to text and text to speech, and it did really well, even with just a few examples as prompts.
So it's using what it knows to figure things out, even without specific training. It's like a friend who can pick up any instrument and just play.
Yes. And they even found that giving it some paired-up text and speech during training, like matching subtitles, gave it a boost.
A quick learner. Okay, so we've got understanding, generating, even emotions. But can it actually do anything useful with all this real-world stuff?
Well, those cross-modal skills are key here. Turns out, with a little nudge, SpiRit-LM can handle speech classification tasks.
Speech classification. Break it down for me.
Basically, figuring out what someone means when they speak, their intent. Imagine a virtual assistant that gets you, even if you don't say it perfectly.
Now that's what I'm talking about. No more arguing with my AI. Okay, this is almost too good. What are the downsides? There's got to be something.
That, my friend, is the big question, and that's what we'll get into next.
Okay, so SpiRit-LM sounds amazing, but sometimes I get this thought like, what if it gets too smart? Like those sci-fi movies where AI decides humans are the problem.
I know what you mean. It's new territory. Got to be careful.
Yeah, exactly. So where's the line? How do we make sure that this tech is used for good?
That's the big question, and researchers are really thinking about it, working on safeguards, to keep things in check.
Good to hear. But what kind of safeguards?
Well, one thing is transparency. Being able to tell if something was made by AI. Imagine if you couldn't tell if a news story was real or made by SpiRit-LM.
Whoa, yeah, that's a scary thought. We're talking misinformation, even worse.
Right. And it's not just that. Impersonation, too. Imagine someone uses this to fake someone's voice.
Oh.
A politician, a celebrity.
Okay, now that is unsettling. Like, we can't even trust our ears anymore. So how do we stay ahead of this? Use it responsibly.
It's got to be a team effort, everyone. Researchers, the people building it, even the government, all of us talking about this, figuring out the rules.
That's like with great power and all that. Except this time, it's all of us with the power, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about avoiding the bad stuff. Think of the good things. Imagine no more language barriers. Anyone can talk to anyone. SpiRit-LM could do that.
Now that is a future I want. Technology bringing us together. But yeah, it all comes down to using it the right way.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that needs to keep happening.
Yeah.
Because as we unlock AI's potential, got to be careful, but also got to be amazed by it.
Well said. We've gone deep today. The tech behind SpiRit-LM, the ethical stuff, wild. It feels like we're on the edge of something huge here. What's the one thing you want listeners to take away from all this?
I'd say, remember, the future of AI, it's not set in stone. It's what we make it. So learn about it, ask questions, and keep an open mind. But also, be careful.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been a wild ride, learning about SpiRit-LM. Excited, but also a little freaked out. So here's a final thought for everyone listening. If AI could get you, really understand you, would you trust it enough to pour your heart out to it? Let us know what you think.